Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show for today's 221,002 Core 2 A+ study group. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Glad to have you along with us. We'll be starting in about 10 minutes. So if you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward unless you'd like to hang out with us in the pre-show, which might be nice too. Let me pop out the chat so I can see it properly. See what's going on here. Hello, everyone. Folks already in the chat room, waiting for things to get started. Hey, DC, Houston is here. Idaho's here, checking in. Wakulla County's here. It's always good. Welcome, New York City, or New York State anyway. Welcome, Joker King. First time here, huh? We'll take care of that. It will be your last time here. No, it'll be better than that. Don't worry. South Africa's checking in. This is not, by the way, the study group. We will do actual, hi, how are you? You'll be able to see me when things get started. I'm just right now, I need to adjust things on my screen so they look better for you. So I'm going to do that right now as we are going through all of this. Let's adjust this. Click. That looks good. Let's adjust this up here. This view. There we go. Show that. That's better. Now we got a little more real estate on the screen, a little less distracting things on the screen. Welcome. Do I play cricket? No, I do not play any cricket here. I would like to, but there's this whole problem I have with physical things. No, I could not play. I'd be too sore. I lift weights. I work out. I try to stay healthy. But sports, I kind of missed my window on that one. I go back. I was a basketball player. So all throughout school, I was a basketball player. That's how that was my thing. But at some point, your knees tell you, perhaps this is not the best idea for you. Have you considered a career in information technology? And I listened to my knees, and that's how that worked out. This is for A+. This will be the 221,002 A+. These lights have been on. Now it's getting a little warm, so let's make it a little cooler in here. Here in Florida, outside it's 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a little bit warm outside. What is that in the other world? It's 26 outside for my Canadian friends and elsewhere around the world. And it's going to be warmer today. And you can kind of see behind me, there's a cricket bat too. You can't see it. You can't see the bat. It's just above the YouTube thing. It goes back up there. You can't see it. I don't know why I'm pointing at that. You can't see that. Get my head out of the way. There we go. Yes, North Florida is where I am. So it's kind of warm and kind of humid, just like we like it here in the South. That's how things normally go for us here. We are doing all 221,002. This first hour, I will ask you questions, and I'll explain to you as we get started how that works. But you can get a head up on that by going to professormesser.com/live. That'll get you a little ahead of the game. That'll work. Hello, Tennessee. Raleigh, North Carolina is here. New Hampshire. Welcome. Well, they got Fort Pierce, so the southern part of Florida, or central southern, eastern central. Texas, welcome. Maryland, welcome. How does this study group work? What a good question. The first hour, I will be asking you questions, and you will be answering the questions online. In the second hour, it's more of an open phone line. We call it the after show. And you can either put questions in the chat room to me, or you can call in on the phone line and do it that way too. Hello, Brooklyn. Atlanta's here. Scola. Thank you for being here. I was in Scotland this past summer. It was amazing. Had a great time there. Hello, New Jersey. Welcome. Nigeria checking in again. Couple folks. Good to have you here. Is the video saved? It is being recorded and saved right now on the YouTube, and you will be able pretty much instantly, when this is over, it'll process for a few minutes, and then the video is immediately available. So you'll be able to get your hands on that. And of course, you can go back to any of the study groups. I have a whole index available. Of course, there are a playlist of the study groups available on YouTube, and there's a list on my website. Each month is different because I have different questions. So you will never get the same question twice on a study group, maybe close to the same question. After a while, I forget the questions I've asked. So I guess if you go back a year, maybe you would see one that's sort of different, but I write them all brand new. So that's sort of how that works. Hello, Jacksonville. More Florida folks checking in. Another Nigeria, welcome. Queen Creek, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, L.A. That would be Los Angeles, not Lloyd Acres. Essex, England is here. Yokosuka, Japan, welcome. It's 1 a.m. Yeah, if you can't hang on, there's always a replay. You can always watch the replay, but we're glad you are able to tune in. New Zealand's here. Welcome. Have I thought of making content for the new CCNA 200-301? Well, of course I've thought about it. So will there be any? We'll have to see. I had content for the old CCNA, as you recall, really the CCENT. And I guess we could sort of think of the new CCNA as a CCENT plus along those lines. Not plus, but additional. We say plus, it sounds like it's a CompTIA thing, but it's not. I'd love to do some because I have course notes for the old one. I have Q&A for the old one. I have some practice exams. So there may be some things I can do there. It's all about time, and apparently we have some right now. So who knows what will happen. Cameroon is here, Apex, North Carolina, Bloomington, Illinois, Winter Haven, Florida. Today is Core 2. 2 days ago and Tuesday was Core 1. So we're doing all Core 2 questions today. Hello, Miami. And Cayocho, welcome. Mesquite, Texas. Maryland is here. All the details about how to answer the questions you will find at professormesser.com/live. We'll get this thing started in just a few minutes. Let's check our recordings. I'm recording up here. That's my streaming server, or the video from my streaming servers, which you see in that upper window. Down here, the little Cylons going back and forth. I realize they're in a circle. It's not real Cylons. Those are video recorders. So I'm recording the audio and video there as well. And it's being recorded on YouTube. So we got a few places. That's good. I think we're pretty much ready. In about 2.5 minutes, we'll be getting started from there. Hello, North Carolina. Yeah, a lot of Florida people in here, huh? Have I considered doing videos on Linux Plus or more advanced CompTIA exam courses? I don't know. I have considered other CompTIA courses. I don't know if they really have the hook I'm looking for. Linux Plus doesn't quite work well with the things. I've tried some Linux videos before, and they're problematic. Not problematic to make or problematic to watch, just problematic to support. It's a long story. Linux people are very picky, and they're not afraid to tell you about it. New Mexico's here, St. Pete, Florida. Not to put everybody in Linux in a bucket, because I use Linux extensively. If you're on my website right now, you're on Linux. So there's plenty of Linux. I love it. I just don't know if I'm the right person for those types of videos. Maryland is here, Colorado. Welcome, Denver, Connecticut, Fort Lauderdale. Haven't been to South Florida in a while. Need to get down there. Am I doing a new Network Plus course? Well, if a new one was to come out, there would probably be a new Network Plus course, yes, but I'm not planning a new one. The current Network Plus exam is the N10007, and if you show up next week, we have an N10007 study group. It's been out for, a year now? The Network Plus, maybe just over. I have to look at the dates. But it's right in the middle of its time frame. We still have years before Network Plus. The current Network Plus goes away and is replaced with anything. So that's where that comes from. Elkhart, Indiana. Ghana is here. New Mexico. North Miami Beach. How about that? Used to work in Hollywood, Florida. Pittsburgh, California. You do that every time, don't you? We always do that. Pittsburgh, California. Always have to take a moment. LACA, welcome. UAE, welcome. Thanks for being here. How does Core 2 compare to Core 1? I'm glad you asked. We'll talk all about it in just a minute. In just 15 seconds, I will explain how those two are very different. You'll know exactly where we're going to. So the folks in Kansas City and Berman, Indiana, and St. Kitts, Caribbean, and New Jersey, and Hampton Road, Virginia, thank you for being here. Let's get this thing started, shall we? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2020 Professor Messer CompTIA 220 1002 Core 2 A+ Study Group. That is a mouthful. We keep adding things on to the name. If you're taking an A+ exam, and it is the 220 1002 version of the exam, or what we are now calling the Core 2 exam, you're in the right place. I'm going to ask you questions in this first hour from the 220 1002 exam objectives, and you will be able to answer them online interactively in real time if you are watching this interactively in real time. We'll talk in a moment about when we do our live events and when you can expect to see this. We have all of our event calendar, and everything you would ever need is at professormesser.com/calendar. You'll be able to find everything there that you will need to know. Here's how you'll answer the questions today. I'll ask you questions during this first hour. You'll see the question and be able to answer it online using a service called Socrative. Socrative you can find by simply opening up a new browser window and visiting this URL, professormesser.com/QA. That will take you to the current question. You can stay on that page. That page will change as the questions change. You don't have to do anything. There's also an app that you can get on your favorite app store. The app is the Socrative Student app. That is the app that you'll want to look for. That Socrative Student app will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. And that will get you to the right place. And if you do all of those things properly, there will be a question waiting for you on the screen right there. That question asks, we call this our rewind question, by the way, because it's a question from last month. So maybe you remember this question from last month. The question asks, a system administrator needs to associate a remote window share with a drive letter. Which of the following commands would provide this functionality? So a system administrator needs to associate a remote window share with a drive letter. Which of the following commands would provide this functionality? Is it share, net, diskpart, netstat, or robocopy? You simply lock in your answer online using the link we have at professormesser.com/QA. And as we go through this, remember, do not put your answers in the chat room. Do not put any hints in the chat room. We'll come back to what that answer is in just a moment. Right now, let me tell you all about what we're doing today. We're able to do these live streams thanks to your ongoing support. And even in these somewhat tumultuous, crazy times, your support is indeed appreciated even more. Thank you for coming to the website. Of course, every single video I make for all of my courses is available for you to watch absolutely free online. Always has been, always will be. You are also able to see when we post new videos by subscribing to our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. And of course, we have new questions every day, pop quiz questions that you will find at professormesser.com/Twitter. You'll also find us on Instagram. I put the questions on Instagram. They're in a carousel. So I give you the question, then you swipe to the left and you can see the answer. That's kind of fun. So feel free to check us out at professormesser.com/Instagram. This is also a good time to tell you that if you would like to help support what we're doing here and not have to spend any money doing it, simply follow this link when you purchase things from Amazon. Go to professormesser.com/Amazon. You pay the same low price you've always paid at Amazon, but Amazon also gives us a little bit of a commission, so you're able to spend $0 out of your pocket, and yet it still is able to keep the lights on that we do here. Always remember that link, professormesser.com/Amazon. Today, we're going to talk all about the A+ Core 2 exam. These were exams that were released just over a year ago on January the 15th, 2019. You need to earn a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. It's kind of an odd scale, an odd grading system. I think they intentionally do that. I don't know what that's about, but certainly nobody duplicates that. It is not repeated anywhere. CompTIA is unique in the way that they handle that. I think that's what they were shooting for. If you're someone who's been studying previous versions of this exam, if you're getting back into your studies and you studied for the 900 series exams and you realize, wow, these are new, these are the 1000 series exams. For the 1002, about 23% of the topics are brand new. Almost a quarter of the exam is new topics. So do not study from materials that are written for previous versions of the exam. It will hurt you when you go into your exam. You will lose points because of so much new content. If you want to see what those differences are, I've highlighted the differences and tells you exactly what's new if you go to professormesser.com/objectives. We did one of these study groups 2 days ago. On Tuesday, it was the Core 1 study group where we talked about mobile devices and networking and hardware and virtualization and cloud computing and hardware and network troubleshooting. Today, it's Core 2, which means all of the questions that I will ask you today are from operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, operational procedures, and potpourri. Okay, maybe not potpourri, but you've got all of those that we will go through. So if you're studying for your Core 2 exam, you are in the right place. There's also a version of my course that you can download and take with you, both video, audio, course notes. You can find out about that at professormesser.com/download-a+. This study group is available for you to watch on a replay. So you can go back to the years of study groups that we've done, and you can see all of them. There's also a podcast audio-only version of this available. You can find out more about that by going to professormesser.com/podcast. So if you have a podcast listening program, it will automatically recognize when a new version, a new edition of the study group is available, and it will download that new episode automatically. So no matter where you are, you'll be able to listen to the latest study groups that we do. Also, about a day later, you'll be able to go out to YouTube, and my marketing manager, Lori, has to listen to this whole thing, and she puts timestamps in there, and you'll find in the YouTube video description, there will be timestamps. So if you want to jump right to a question, right to an answer, or right to any other part of that study group, you can do it very, very, very quickly. Lori's watching this in the replay. Hi, Lori. Thank you for doing this. It does help us out when we're trying to find those things after the fact. So let's talk about this question that we had. A system administrator needs to associate a remote Windows file share with a drive letter. So which of the following commands would provide that functionality? Is it share, net, diskpart, netstat, or robocopy? And you can see for the people who are watching, apparently we've got a lot of new people that are watching this month, because only 43% of you chose share, 28% of you chose net, 20% of you chose diskpart, 5% netstat, and 3% robocopy. Kind of started high and then went right down from there. Almost a linear scale, isn't it? As we see that. If you've ever been at the Windows command prompt and you wanted to be able to type a command in to be able to connect to and associate a particular share that is already out there on the network with a drive letter, the command you would use for that is not share, that 44% of you chose. It's actually net. The net command is the one you would like to use. The actual command is net use. I don't have a net use up here, but net use is the one that allows you to use a share. You specify what the particular drive letter is that you would like to use, and then you would absolutely have access to that drive letter. For instance, you could associate a drive letter. For instance, here they are. Here's a net use, H:, and then / server name / share name. Of course, that's the standard type of reference when you're referencing a share that's on a remote device. You put that device name and the name of the share. And then from that point on, every time you reference drive H, it is effectively referencing the share that's across the network. So if you're one of the folks that answered, the 30% of you that answered net, that is the right answer. Share is not a command that you would use to be able to do that. Not even sure share is a command at all, is it? I might have made that one up. But it sounded so good that I had to put this in the list. CompTIA will occasionally do this on their exam. They don't do it a lot, but occasionally they will put a command or a reference that does not actually exist in the real world. So I did that for you as well. Diskpart is the disk partitioning program that allows you to modify how a drive is partitioned. You can format a drive. Anything dealing with drives on a local machine is done with diskpart at the command line. You can, of course, use your disk manager in Windows to effectively do the same thing as well. Netstat, another good one that you can use. Netstat is a great utility for understanding network statistics, who's connecting to your device and who are you connecting to. It's a network-related utility, but it does not allow you to share a remote drive. It's not a Windows drive sharing utility. And robocopy, the robust copy command in Windows, is used to copy files from one device to another. It would also not be used to be able to share a drive. and reference it with the drive letter in Windows. The only right answer here is B, net. The 30% of you that chose the net use command, or the net command, net use is the one specifically that we would use. You got that one absolutely correct. So that's how we play this game. Not really a game. You don't really win anything other than you win a knowledge. You win the learning that you would get by getting these questions either right or wrong. This is one where in these study groups, I like to give you different kinds of questions. And in fact, the first new question of the study group is always a performance-based question. For those of you that have taken a CompTIA exam before, you're already familiar with this. If you have not taken a CompTIA exam before, you want to be absolutely familiar with this. The entire exam is mostly multiple choice questions, similar to the one we just saw where there was a question and multiple answers to choose from. But you will get a handful of questions at the very beginning that will not be multiple choice. These will be anything but multiple choice. They will be fill-in-the-blank questions. They will be matching questions. You may have to put things in an order from fastest to slowest or slowest to fastest. You may have to drag and drop things on an image. You never know exactly what it's going to be, but it is not going to be multiple choice. So I like to give you a performance-based question right out of the gate. Our very first new question of the study group is always a performance-based question. So here is your performance-based question of the month. The question asks, match the description to the most applicable scripting language. So I have 5 different descriptions, and I have 5 different scripting languages. For which of these types of descriptions would you match with these scripting languages? So it's a 1-to-1. So you match these up. There's no duplicates here. So this won't be as bad as perhaps you might think it's going to be. For those of you listening on the podcast, let's go through all 5 of these descriptions and the 5 different scripting languages. The first description is delete old log files on a Linux server. The second is to create a new user in Active Directory. The third is change the configuration of a router. The fourth is calculate a total from multiple spreadsheets. And the fifth is change the background color of a web page. Our 5 scripting languages are PowerShell, a shell script, Visual Basic Scripting, JavaScript, and Python. Those are your 5 different scripting languages. So knowing that you have to choose from PowerShell, a shell script, Visual Basic Scripting, JavaScript, and Python, let's go through all 5 of these again. Do we want to delete old log files on a Linux server? Which one of those scripts would you use? PowerShell, shell script, Visual Basic Scripting, JavaScript, or Python? If you want to create a new user in Active Directory, which of those 5 would it be? If you wanted to change the configuration of a router, which of those 5 would it be? If you wanted to calculate a total from multiple spreadsheets, which 5 would it be? And then if you wanted to change the background color of a web page, would that be PowerShell, shell script, Visual Basic Scripting, JavaScript, or Python? Now, if you think you know the answer, you want to put your answer in at professormesser.com/QA. Lock it in. See if you can sort these out. This may be one of those where you might know some of them, and the ones you don't know will be left over. So that might help you a little bit. You may be able to calculate us, eliminate us a little bit, and get some of the others out of the way. Remember, no hints and no answers in the chat room. We'll have to make sure that you are doing this in the mode that you would be in if you were sitting in the exam. So you don't have any access to the internet. You don't have access to books. They take away your phone. They take away your watch. They lock it away while you are in the exam. So this is one where you have to remember what these things happen to be. This one is a little bit easier perhaps than some you might see on the exam. It's also common with certain questions on the exam that they might give you more than one thing than the other. So they might give you these 5 descriptions, but they'll give you 7 different scripting languages. So you might have some left over. I tried to make it a little bit easier for you. So that would not be the same situation for this particular question. So let's step through each one of these And let's see what I selected for each one. We'll start with the very first one, which is delete old log files on a Linux server. Now, if you're working with a Linux server, you're working with even Mac OS, the way that you would work at the command line is from a shell. That's what we call that command line functionality in those operating systems. So if you wanted to automate some of the functions of the operating system in that shell, you would create a shell script. So for the first, deleting old log files from a Linux server, B shell script is what you would use. In fact, when I delete, I have a process that automatically deletes old log files on my server, and I use a shell script to do that. So it's a good example of what you would use for that. The second was to create a new user in Active Directory. Well, we know in Windows, that's Active Directory, that says Windows, immediately we know it's Windows, that we have a command prompt. But for those of you that are already administrators on Windows machines, you don't use that simple command prompt. You use the more powerful command prompt that is available in Windows, which is PowerShell. PowerShell is a much more functional command prompt that allows us to use some of the more advanced functions within Windows, like modifying Active Directory, and we can do that by scripting things in PowerShell. So that might be helpful to be able to do that. The third on our list is change the configuration of a router. Change the configuration of a router. I think whenever I start working with routers, firewalls, other devices on the network, and you want to automate this, if you hear anything about a network device and you hear about automation, then you will absolutely know that it's going to be Python. Python is the latest and greatest in automation, especially on the network side. Became incredibly popular as we had cloud computing became popular. We needed a way to automate cloud computing, and we realized Python would be a great way to do that. So anytime we're automating anything with the network, servers, cloud computing resources, virtualization, you're probably going to be using some flavor of Python to do that. The fourth on our list was to calculate a total from multiple spreadsheets. Well, already you can think spreadsheets. This must be using some type of Microsoft spreadsheet utility like Excel, which is a good example to do this. Excel, of course, uses its own scripting language to be able to do this, called VBScript for Visual Basic Scripting. VBScript is very common to see in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, any of the Microsoft utilities, and being able to do that. The last one on our list was change the background color of a web page. If you ever need to manipulate what's happening in a browser, you ever want to script what's happening in a browser, then you'll be using the only one that's left on our list, JavaScript. JavaScript allows us to modify a lot of the things that happen on the back end. So if you're doing anything on the internet these days, people are scripting a lot of functions on their website. If you go to professormesser.com, there's a lot of JavaScript that runs on those pages. It's a great way to automate and script things so that people can have a more dynamic and easier to use experience when they're on your website. So that is the best, most applicable description and scripting language. Now, this is a new set of utilities and new set of scripts, new set of content for the 221,002 exam. So make sure you're very familiar with these types of scripts and when you would use them. I think that'd be a good thing to know as you're going into this exam. Let's get away from these questions that we have that are performance-based questions. Let's go back to a multiple choice-based question. Although this next multiple choice-based question is almost a performance-based question. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. This question asks, pick the correct order for malware removal. Now, you know, my method of malware removal is to delete everything and start from scratch. But that isn't always an option. Sometimes we still may need access to some of the data that's on this machine before we nuke it. So we need to remove the malware first so that we can access the information we need and then finally delete everything that's there. So I have listed out 5 different processes for malware removal, and I need you to pick the right one. So those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to go through each one of these. Why did I write such a long question? Here we go. Answer A is quarantine, disable system restore, remediate, and educate the end user. Is that the correct order? The second option, option B, is educate the end user, disable system restore, quarantine, and remediate. Answer C is quarantine, schedule scans, educate the end user, and enable system restore. Answer D, I'm already regretting this. Answer D is disable system restore, remediate, educate the end user, and quarantine. And the last one on the list, thankfully, is educate the end user, quarantine, remediate, and enable system restore. I will tell you that I would not ask this question unless I thought it was important. So this process of malware removal is part of the exam objectives. They expect you to know what do you start with, what do you end with, and how do you handle this in the middle. So pick the answer that makes sense for you. I'm going to very, very quickly go through this one more time for the people listening on the podcast. Pick the correct order for malware removal. Do we quarantine, disable system restore, remediate, and educate the end user? Or do we educate the end user, disable system restore, quarantine, and remediate? Or do we quarantine, schedule scans, educate the end user, and enable system restore? Or do we disable system restore, remediate, educate the end user, and quarantine? Or lastly, do we educate the end user, quarantine, remediate, and enable system restore? I can't believe I said that twice, but there it is. We're not going to say it again. We're going to go right through this. This is one you probably would want to know. These are topics that will help you. In fact, if you know the entire process, you'll be able to answer probably at least one question on the exam, and maybe there'll be others there to go through as well. We'll have to see what makes sense for what you are doing. So lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. Please, no hints or answers in the chat room. Why did I write such a long question? I think it's important. I mean, ultimately, that's why I wrote it. I'm just wondering now, as I sit here live having to say it, why did I write this question? But that's how we are. We're going to go through. We're going to do this. We're already going through. I think it's an important set of information you would know. I would not have put it in here if I did not think that. So let's see how you did on this one. Let's click the How Do We Do button. 68% of you answered answer A, the very first option, which was quarantine, disable system restore, remediate, and educate the end user. We have kind of a tie for second between 14 and 11% with answers C and E, and then single digits with 2 and 3% between B and D, respectfully. So this is one that becomes pretty important. So your best place to go when you're trying to figure out these things is to go directly to the CompTIA exam objectives. Now, this, by the way, if you don't have a copy of these exam objectives, you should absolutely get this list of exam objectives. It's incredibly important to have this, and it will list out for you everything you need to know on the exam, and in fact lists out in section 3.3, which says, given a scenario, use best practice procedures for malware removal, and gives you 7 steps for removing malware. They didn't used to count them. They didn't used to number the steps. Now they have numbered them. You don't have to remember which one was number 5, which one was number 2. They're not going to ask you that. In fact, they won't ask you the numbers at all. So just forget about the numbers are there, but just the numbers are there so you'll know what's first and what's last. So the first thing you should do is identify and research malware symptoms. Do you have malware? Yes or no? The second is quarantine the infected systems. If you have malware, quarantine. Where have we heard that before? I've heard that term before. Not sure where it was, but what that means is you should disconnect this device from the network so that nobody else can get infected from this single device. The third on our list is to disable system restore in Windows. In fact, in the chat room, some people said, why would I disable system restore? If you've ever used System Restore, it's a great tool. You can make a configuration change to your Windows, you reboot, and you realize, boy, did I completely mess up the configuration of this machine. I wish there was a way I could go back in time and choose a previous configuration and pretend none of this happened. And That's exactly what System Restore allows you to do. A fabulous utility that has gotten me out of many, many problems in the past. However, the bad guys know, the folks that are putting the malware on these systems, the attackers are completely aware that you might want to rewind back to a previous point in time. So not only does the malware infect your system today, the malware goes back to your System Restore save points and infects your save points as well. That's why we would disable System Restore, because when you disable it, it deletes all of the old restore points. So that's why you would do that. The fourth is to remediate the infected systems, which effectively means get rid of the malware. So you would update your anti-malware software, you would scan, you would use your removal tool and remove the malware itself. You would think at that point you'd be done. We removed the malware. No, we're only halfway finished. There's 3 more steps. The next one is to schedule scans and run updates. So once you've removed the malware, did you really remove the malware? And if you think you really removed the malware, it would be nice to make sure a malware scan, at least a manual scan, ran once a day at a minimum. And you may want to have it automatically download updated signatures. So you might want to schedule those things so this doesn't happen again. The next on the list is to enable System Restore, because we deleted all the System Restore points. Let's turn it back on, because that's a useful tool to have. And in fact, you may want to click the button when you turn it on that says, let's make a new restore point starting right now, because we know we have a good system. That way, if somebody does make a configuration change when I leave the room, they can go back in time at least to right now. And lastly, and perhaps this should be the first, but they do have it here as the last, educate the end user. Let them know how this malware got on their system, make them understand what they can click, what they can't click. If they see something in an email, not to always trust it. Those types of things are pretty important. So that is the situation. Those are the different options there between 1 and 7 that you should follow when trying to remove malware from a system. So that's what you would run into. In the chat rooms, folks even say, but what if you do things like run a malware scan? So you get to that remediate the infected system. That's that option B. 4B is to scan and use removal techniques. You scanned it, and then it didn't find anything. And this happens all the time, by the way. That's why most people that are removing malware or familiar with the malware removing process have multiple tools they use to be able to identify these things. You might use the built-in antivirus, anti-malware in Windows. You might use the Windows malware removal tool. You might use a third-party application like Malwarebytes, and there are other tools as well. And in fact, most people will have a grouping of these, and they'll run all of them to make sure that none of those tools are able to find any malware on a system. It does happen quite a bit to be able to have that there. Ultimately, of course, the option that is the best option, delete everything, reinstall from a known good backup, or reinstall from the very beginning from known good media. Hopefully you have a backup. This is why you have backups, so that you can easily delete the whole thing, restore. And if you're in an environment that's a corporate environment, you probably have images. So you tell people don't save your local files, or don't save any files locally. All of your files are going to be stored out in a centralized server. In fact, we won't allow it. We'll administratively lock down your machine so it won't do that. And that way, if you are infected, we're simply delete everything, reimage from a known good image, and you're back to where you were in just a few minutes. So that becomes useful as well. So if you're one of the folks that did answer quarantine, disable System Restore, remediate, and then educate the end user, that is the malware removal process. There's obviously other things in there I did not put in the list. I didn't put all 7 in there. Can you imagine me going through all 7 of those with each one of these? I only put the actual process, follow from start to finish. There are some missing in that list, but that is at least where you start and where you end, and the correct order for the ones that are listed there. So hopefully that's something you can be familiar with. Answer A was the correct one. 71% of you got that absolutely right. Another question from the chat room, would just running from a virtual machine be a good alternative? That way, if it's infected, you can just make a new VM. And in fact, there are, in types of Windows configurations, I've seen this in Windows configurations, there are Windows utilities you can get, I forget the name of it offhand, that effectively runs your system as a virtual machine. And that way, if it gets infected, you just reverse out of it, go back to the last snapshot, and you're back to where you were. I forgot the name of this. I'm not even sure if it's still something that is a recent utility. I'm sure somebody in the chat room knows exactly the one I'm thinking about, and they'll be able to put it in there as we're going through. That's a perfectly viable idea. I know people that have run that particular utility. It's a little bit more involved. You have to kind of know what you're doing to be able to use it properly, but that is a way to do it. Virtual machines obviously have snapshots that can be created, which makes it very easy to go back in time and be able to remove malware. It's a very common way to do it, in fact. So hopefully that can help you a little bit if you're trying to find how to remove malware. That's how you do it. It's obviously, that's a science unto itself. We could talk for days about the concept, ideas, and processes for malware removal. Let's do that. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do another question. I have more questions for you. If you do have questions about it, though, write that down. I'll be glad to answer those in the after show. Our next question on our list would be, which of the following would be the best way to protect corporate data when connecting from hotels and conference centers? Now, I will tell you, by the way, that I created all of these questions a month ago. And I scheduled this month's set of study groups to have 2 of them this week and 2 of them next week. I did not plan out that we would all be sitting at home over these next 2-week periods. It just happened to work that way. And I did not plan out these questions with any of this in mind, obviously, but this may be a gimme at this point. Which of the following would be the best way to protect corporate data when connecting from hotels and conference centers? Is it VPN? Is it WWAN? Is it SAN? Is it WEP? Is it SSID? At this point, I want 100% people to get this one right. I think we should all. I'm not even going to delete people that are saying it's easy, which I normally do because I don't think that's something you should say. But I think on this one, you should absolutely do this. If you think you know the answer, I want you to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer so that you can really tell me that you really know what this one happens to be. So go to professormesser.com/QA. No hints in the chat room, no answers in the chat room, as if you would need it in this scenario. So be sure to do that. Have all those. Figure out what that happens to be. I think that might help you too as you do that and go through this list. I think it's going to help you know exactly what these are. Whenever I start looking through the answers, I try to get rid of the ones I don't know or don't like. Like, I don't think that's it. I don't think it's the other one. Maybe being able to eliminate some of them can break this down. I don't know that a lot of you are going to have to do that on this, as some people are saying, yes, some of you have been doing this for a while now. I should have also said, which of the following would be the best way to protect corporate data when connecting from hotels, conference centers, and your house? Maybe that would help as well. Let's see how we answered on this one. I'll take 97% of you. Say VPN, suddenly an incredibly popular technology, the virtual private network. The virtual private network, 3% of you say it's SSID. I'm not sure what that was about there, but it's not SSID. I think we're going to go with the 97%. By the way, 0% said a wireless WAN, 0% said SAN, 0% said WEP. I think that one was a little bit too much of a gimme. How does this VPN work anyway? We know there's a client that we run on a local machine. What is it connecting to? In most cases, it's connecting from your local device at a coffee shop, at a hotel, or at your house. And this client is encrypting all of the data that you're sending out on the network, and it is sending it to a VPN concentrator. Usually this is a standalone purpose-built appliance is what we call these things. This purpose-built appliance is designed to have hardware inside of it that is able to do encryption and decryption at very high speeds for many, many hundreds or even thousands of people. You can scale these up quite well. The VPN concentrator can then support all of this calculation because obviously if you're encrypting data or you're decrypting data, there is a cost there. The cost is CPU time. It takes CPU cycles to be able to crunch through that. Of course it does, because if it didn't, if it was relatively simple to decrypt, we probably would not be using that type of encryption. So the VPN concentrator commonly has this purpose-built hardware that's able to do that encryption, decryption very fast, because if it wasn't fast, we would not be using it, be able to have that there. So if we have that VPN concentrator, it's going to take that data that's encrypted, but obviously the services inside of your network can't use the data if it's encrypted. So the VPN concentrator is decrypting it and sending that information effectively in the clear or non-VPN encrypted into the rest of your network. And there you're able to print, you're able to access files, you're able to do everything, which means it's as if you're working normally inside of your network. If anybody ever taps into that link between the concentrator and your laptop and they collect the packets, they collect the data that you're sending back and forth, it looks like garbage. It looks like nonsense. They can't make any common connection between this data and what's really on the inside. Someone can collect every bit of data and they still would not have access to any of your information. That is the beauty of having those concentrators. Now, in this case, I've got a standalone device. The VPN concentrator, as I mentioned, is a purpose-built appliance. That's all it does. It only does VPN. In reality, the VPN concentrator is sometimes built into other devices. It's very common for next-generation firewalls to have a VPN concentration function built into them as well. I know that one or two of the Soho routers that I use in my home have the ability to connect to an IPsec VPN from those devices. Obviously, those devices are doing wireless access, they're doing switching, they're doing routing, they're doing NATing, but they also have VPN built in. And some VPN is software only. But when you have to scale up and support everybody in your company connecting all at once from their homes, it sure helps if you have a purpose-built appliance like a VPN concentrator. So that is, whenever we talk about VPN, I think everybody was spot on with that and being able to provide access to what they need over the virtual private network. If you've ever gone through my A+ videos, there are 135 videos, I think, for A+. It's extensive. There's 70-something videos for the 1002 exam. There's a lot of videos. And so one of the things that I have done is I've taken every single bit of text, all of the important graphics, all of the charts that I've created, everything that I could have thought to put together, I put together and created a set of course notes for you. Because I realize not everybody has the time to go through every single video and make their own notes. Maybe you do, and that's great, but not everybody does. I also notice a lot of people are not able to make extensive sets of notes, and I can appreciate that as well. So what I try to do is make a set of notes that is extensive. These are the CompTIA A+ core notes, core 2 notes that I created, and they have, let's do 2 pages here so we can really see it. Everything that's from my videos, it's broken down by video. It's all seen. Everything that is in there is in these notes. These are pretty extensive. And what I did was make one for the Core 1 exam. I made another one for the Core 2 exam. Everything's in there. In fact, there's the Microsoft command line tools, all the command line information on these 2 pages. There's the network command line tools, just everything I tried to cram into these sets of notes so that you'd have those things there. This is probably the most comprehensive set of notes that I've seen for the exam. It's the set of notes that I wish I had during the exam. If you want more information on that, you can find it at professormesser.com/1000notes. This is also a great way to support the website for those of you that would like to be able to do that. I'd like to give you something back for what you're doing. There's also a physical version. The digital version's online. You can download it right now, purchase and download. There's also a physical version. It's a printed book made from dead trees. This is something maybe not of you are familiar with these books, but there they are. This is nice, high quality paper. It's all color on the inside. You can see that. It's a nice book. I wouldn't do it any other way. So you can either purchase the digital version that's right here and download it as a PDF file, and you can put that PDF on all of your devices. It's not one of those ridiculously restrictive PDF things that you can't print. You can't. No, I want you to use this. I want you to put it anywhere that you are studying to be able to use it. So it's hopefully something that can help you as well. Thank you for your support and your purchase of these. It does go a long way to keeping the lights on. So especially in these crazy times, maybe it's something that can help you get through those last bits of the exam and being able to make that happen. Let's do some more questions from the Core 2 exam. The next question asks, which of the following would best describe the capture of all data sent to a device without the knowledge of the device owner? Would that be spoofing? Would it be man in the middle? Would it be social engineering? Would it be denial of service? Or would it be zero-day attack? The question again, which of the following would best describe the capture of all data sent to a device without the knowledge of the device owner? Would that be spoofing, man in the middle, social engineering, denial of service, or zero-day attack? You think you know the answer? Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and answer the question there. Or remember, no questions or no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We don't want to be able to have any hints on there either. If you think you know the answer, put them right there at ProfessorMesser.com/QA. One of the best places you can go to lock that in. Get your answers in there. Maybe you do know what these are. It's more of a security question, isn't it? There is a section on security, an entire domain on security on the Core 2 exam. So that's one you will absolutely want to be able to use. From the chat room, folks talking about the course notes. Is the course notes in my videos enough to pass the A+ exam? I would not recommend using any single set of resources in your studies. Why would you not use as much as you possibly can? You want to use a good book. You want some videos, maybe some course notes to go along with that. You want some good hands-on, and you want some Q&A. And so I've got a list of those. If you go out to the Professor Messer website, there are recommended A+ resources in my A+ menu. You can pull that down from the top of any page and find what those happen to be. So make sure. Do some people only watch my videos and only use the notes to pass their exam? They do, but usually those folks are already familiar with a lot of these topics anyway. But if I'm taking an exam, I want to have the best possible chance of passing that exam. So that's one that will be pretty important. Make sure you have all the resources you could possibly need. Learning from a book is very different than learning from videos. Learning from videos is very different than learning from hands-on. And once you've already done all of those things, do you really remember it? Why not do some sample tests and some Q&A to really find out? That's my strategy. Maybe that's one that will help you as well. Let's see how you did with this question. Which of the following would best describe the capture of all data sent to a device without the knowledge of the device owner? 74% of you say it's man in the middle, but 17% of you say spoofing is the right answer. 6% said zero day, 4% said social engineering, 0% said denial of service. Wouldn't it be funny if it was denial of service? That'd be great. 0%. No, of course it's not denial of service. The 73% of you that said man in the middle is absolutely correct. Man in the middle is the right answer. This is where someone could sit in the middle of a conversation on the network, collect data, watch the data go by, in some cases even inject data into the stream as it's going by, and neither side of the conversation even knows it's happening. It's completely unknown to anybody. They think it's a normal day. They're having a normal conversation. And in fact, man in the middle is one where data can be redirected. It can be captured. Data can be injected. There's a lot you can do here. On a single local network, one common way to get into that connection and perform a man in the middle is to do something like ARP poisoning. That's a very common way to get into the middle of a conversation. ARP itself, the address resolution protocol, doesn't have any security built into it, so that becomes very easy. In fact, we've taken the security that we would normally want to have in the protocol. It's very common now for switches to be able to notice if someone is performing ARP poisoning so that they can then prevent a man-in-the-middle situation from occurring. So there's many switches have a security function built into them to specifically prevent things like a man in the middle. So it's a very good example of that. If you're one of those 73% of you that chose man in the middle, that is exactly what the right answer is. If you answered B, those 73% of you were spot on with that. You know your security very well. I have another question for you. Let's do some more. I've got more here. This question is more of a Windows question that asks, is it a Windows question? I think it is. It asks, which of the following would be the best way to view a historical summary of application crashes? Which of the following would be the best way to view a historical summary of application crashes? Would it be Task Manager? Would it be Safe Mode? Would it be System Configuration? Would it be Reliability Monitor? Would it be Computer Management? Those are the 5 options available to you. So which of those would be the best way to view a historical summary of application crashes? Task Manager, Safe Mode, System Configuration, Reliability Monitor, and Computer Management. Those are your 5 options. Lock that option in. If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's the best way to do it and have those there. Maybe this is one that you've even used before. This is why I mentioned getting hands-on is so useful. Not just reading a book, not just watching the videos, not just reading through the notes, but getting some hands-on can be really useful, because if you've done this before, it's going to fire that synapse in your brain and go, oh yeah, I used that utility. I remember doing that to view a historical summary of application crashes. I didn't just view it in a video. I didn't just read it in a book, but I actually did it. And I think all those things together, they work with each other. It's more than doing any one thing. It's that synergy of putting all of those together, and suddenly it's larger. The whole is larger than the sum of its parts. And that's a good example of where that might help you. Which of the following would be the way? If you've not used Windows and you've not viewed a historical summary of application crashes, this is going to be a pretty difficult question then. You may want to take a guess. And on your exam, taking a guess is a great idea. Do not leave any questions blank on your exam. We know that leaving a question blank gets you no points. We know that getting a question wrong also gets you no points. So getting a question wrong is effectively the same as leaving it blank, which means it's not a negative. They don't take points away from you as far as we know on the exam. The only way that you really have an advantage is to answer every question. So if you don't know what the answer is here, just take a guess. Just try to an educated guess, but a guess nonetheless. If you don't have any education with this particular option, maybe just put A's in or D's in all the way across, or maybe do a Christmas tree, whatever makes sense for you. Let's see what the answer or what you answered on this one. Which of the following would be the best way to view a historical summary of application crashes? Not a majority, but 45% of you is the plurality that chose Reliability Monitor. 45% of you say that's the right answer. We have 26% that said Computer Management, almost a tie at 21% that said Task Manager. So it could be Computer Management or Task Manager. Those seem to be viable answers. And then we have 5% that say System Configuration, 3% say Safe Mode. Obviously, not a lot of you have much to say about those two. You don't think those are what it could be. So application crashes are obviously a significant problem. If you've ever been using Windows, you probably had an application crash. And in fact, you'll notice here, this is a pretty good one. Windows Explorer stopped working, and then Windows goes to check for a solution of the problem. This is really, sometimes you do get a message on the screen that says, oops, I just crashed. Sorry about that. Sometimes the application just disappears. I was typing away and then click, it's gone. No message, no warning, just disappeared completely. One of the things you could do is to check the event viewer. In that event viewer, there's a log, and it will tell you what's there. But you'll notice on this question, event viewer was not one of those answers. And in fact, I think if I put event viewer on this list, it still would not be the right answer, because the question asked which of the following would be the best way to view a historical summary of application crashes. Event viewer is an awful way to view anything. It is a horrible way to view anything. It's just very detailed, and you can eventually sift through all of the hay to find the needle that you're looking for. Event viewer is just a very, very non-easy way, and it still does not show you a historical summary of application crashes. It shows you individual events in the event log when an application might have crashed, if you happen to know how to set a filter to get that information, and the event log goes back to the time frame that you would like to find. It's so many different problems and variables using Event Viewer, but ultimately you may need to get down to the details of Event Viewer. Wouldn't it be nice if something could sift through Event Viewer for us and find all of the things we were looking for and present to us on the screen a beautiful summary of every time an application has crashed, and then show us the actual events from Event Viewer without us having to do any filters, without us having to launch Event Viewer, without us having to sift through the literal hundreds of thousands of lines of events that are in a Windows machine. Well, there is a way to do it, because you're able to do it using Reliability Monitor, which gives you this beautiful screen which takes all of the issues on your system. It goes through everything that's in your event viewer and shows you exactly when an event had a problem, what the problem was with that application at that particular event, and you're able to get an idea of how often this application is having a problem. Breaks it all down for you. Ultimately, you may end up having to uninstall and reinstall the app, which is a very common way to troubleshoot these application crashes. Let's get a better view of Reliability Monitor. There it is. It'll show you on a chart. This starts at a particular date and goes forward. It shows you all of the problems that were application failures, Windows failures, miscellaneous failures, warnings, and informational messages. In fact, you can go right to the critical events up here, click on one of the critical events, and it shows you what particular service or application was having a problem. This application stopped responding and was closed, and then you can click here to check for a solution. How nice that is. That's a fantastic summary. Doesn't that beat having to go to Event Viewer? And if you've ever used Event Viewer, you know this is so much faster, so much better, so much clearer. Gets rid of all of the chaff, gets rid of all the hay, and takes you right to all of the needles. What a great place to go. Event Viewer is great when you really do need to get down to the details. But if you just want something to summarize it for you, Reliability Monitor might be the choice for you. That is the right answer. If you answered D, Reliability Monitor, 45% of you got that one absolutely right. I did this question really just so I could tell people about Reliability Monitor. I think it's a tool that not enough of us use. And so Reliability Monitor can save you an enormous amount of time. And in a way, it's great that half of you knew what it was. I think it's also great that half of you didn't, because now you can go use it. This is great, being able to use it and take advantage of those and having the details of everything that's there. Pretty nice to have that functionality there as well. Now, if you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, which means you already have your CompTIA certification or one of another certifications that needs CEUs, then I will be glad to give you a 1-hour CEU. If this is for CompTIA, it's a 1-hour webinar category CEU, but you have to follow these instructions. So in these instructions, make sure you do this. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there to contact us. That contact us link, there is a place for you to put your name, put that in. Make sure you put an email address, because I need to email this back to you, so that does need to be correct. There's a subject line, and if in that subject line, if you would be nice enough to put that this is the March 2020 Core 2 A+, and then on a single line by itself, somewhere in the text of the message that's underneath, please put the word Reliability Monitor. I guess the words Reliability Monitor. That is our super secret code words of the month. And then you can also put anything else you'd like in there. I'm the one reading through these. So if you want to put any other messages, I'm not always able to respond back to all of these other messages, but I do read through every single one of them. You can submit that. And then in about a week or so, plus or minus, quite honestly, I will send you an email that has been digitally signed that says this certifies that you have watched 1 hour of a study group because you followed the instructions, you knew what the super secret code word was, and that gives you 1 CEU. So that will be useful. Now, if you haven't passed an exam, you're not certified yet, that won't help you. You don't need to collect CEUs yet because you have nothing for which a CEU collection would help you with. These are used for renewal, so that's there. Folks in the chat room were also asking earlier, hey, is this the chat that goes with the live feed? It is. You're in the right place. The chat that's on the same page as the video, the chat that is on the same page as the YouTube video, that is the same chat that I am watching. Be able to have that there. It's the chat that I'm going to reference also in the second part in the after show to be able to get those things there as well. I think we have time for one more question. So let's get one more in before we lose all of the time that we have allocated to this. The next question asks, a web developer is creating an application that will allow users to manage their personal information. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be PCI DSS? Would it be GDPR? Would it be EULA? Would it be PHI? Or would it be DRM? A web developer is creating an application that will allow users to manage their personal information. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be PCI DSS? Would it be GDPR? Would it be EULA? Would it be PHI? Or would it be DRM? If you think you know the answer, lock it in right there to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers or hints in the chat room. Yes, a CEU is Continuing Education Unit. It is a way to earn credits towards renewals, generally, of certifications. There are other places that will use CEUs, but generally, if you're already you already have a certification and you need to renew that certification, it's very common for that certification entity to ask you to perform different things. They want you to go to training, attend a trade show, watch an event online like this one. And each time you do one of those things, a certain number of continuing education unit credits is available that you can then submit. And after you submit a certain number, it renews your certifications. That's what a CEU is. And it's how do you do that with CompTIA? There are many varied ways to do it. I created a video on all of the different ways to renew your A+ certification, A+ Network Plus and Security Plus. And it's called, if you search on the YouTube, How to Renew Your A+ Network Plus and Security Plus certifications in just a few hours. What is it with me and the long titles? But there it is. But that's what it is. So it's one of the challenges. How do you make a video? I wouldn't just say how to renew your certifications, how to renew it in just a few hours, which, by the way, would not involve CEUs, interestingly enough, to be able to have that there. So lock in your answers on this one, and let's see if you happen to know what this one happens to be. Take a guess. Yes, if you don't know, take a guess. That's what you should do on your exam as well, is take the guess, figure out what that happens to be. Maybe this would be one you would run into. If you're in a meeting with folks and they're talking about you're having users and there's personal information and they need to manage their personal information, this is one that would be pretty important to know. Let's see how you did with this one. Click the button. 43% is the top number here. Again, not a majority, but pretty close to 50%. Say GDPR, whatever that is. We'll talk in a moment about what that is. I'd say it's a tie for second place between EULA and PHI. At 10%, we have PCI DSS, and 9%, it's DRM. Now, I could have written out what all of these things are in their full names. And I think I might give away some of this, but the exam does this a lot, where they ask you a question and the answer is based on these abbreviations. And the exam itself doesn't ask trivia questions. They're not going to ask you, what do the letters GDPR stand for? You'll never get a question like that on the exam. That type of trivia question is not what you would find with CompTIA. Instead, CompTIA might ask you, a web developer is creating an application that will allow users to manage their personal information. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? And they'll put as one of the answers GDPR, and you're supposed to know that that means General Data Protection Regulation. See how that works? You still have to know in many ways what those abbreviations are, although I might say these days we use GDPR so much, I don't know that anybody knows that it means General Data Protection Regulation. I think we just call it GDPR now because we've just used it so much. This is a regulation from the EU that it was created because companies were storing your personal information, and the EU felt that you, as the end user, should have more control over what companies do with your private data. I think that's a pretty valid concern and things people often are concerned about, because you're usually putting your name, your address, your photos, your bank details, social information, medical information. There's tons of data that's being stored. So how do you make it so that this goes back into the hands of the users? And in fact, GDPR was the way you do it, of course, is you get government involved. I guess there's your argument for or against whatever's going on here, is we created a law. We have this regulation now that manages this. So this particular regulation controls the export of personal data so that the users can decide what happens with their data. The users can submit to the owner of a web service, please delete all of my data. Please delete everything that I've ever done on your website. And this GDPR requires that the website owner delete everything. Now, part of the challenge with this, of course, this is an EU regulation. And I get many requests to my website. Somebody will purchase something from me and they will send me a note and say, okay, I've just purchased this. Now delete all of my information. Well, the problem, of course, is that in the United States, we have the Internal Revenue Service that wants to see all of my records. So I have to keep certain types of records for a certain amount of time. So I'll delete everything I can, but even then I'm not mandated to. This is only for the EU. There is some international law argument that says anybody in the world should also be deleting this data. We still have not worked out the legalities on that one, to be fair. So that's why GDPR would be the right answer here, because the question asks, we need to allow the users to manage their own personal information. Now, what about these other options that we had? We had 18% said PHI, your personal health information. There's a pretty important one these days to be familiar with. And in fact, you should be familiar with if you're working with a healthcare organization and storing data. There's a whole set of requirements that are important that you have for that healthcare information. There's also the EULA, the End User Licensing Agreement. This is the agreement that is created by a company that is licensing software to you, and it details how that software is to be used based on that license. So before you use Microsoft Windows, that big thing that you scroll through, and at the end of this, you punch the button that says, yes, I agree to the license, that's a EULA. The thing that you never read, that's a EULA. In larger organizations where they are buying a huge number of products, maybe they're putting antivirus on thousands of computers. Before they buy those 1,000 licenses of antivirus, it's very common that whoever's purchasing it will ask the antivirus company, let us see a copy of the EULA. Let's see if it's something we agree with. And in fact, very often they'll say, we don't like that part. We'd like to change that part. The lawyers talk back and forth. And then finally, the EULA is finalized and you have a customized EULA for that particular transaction. That's very common in those very large transactions. We also have a PCI DSS, the payment card industry's DSS, which is the standards they set for how credit card information will be protected as it's stored and goes across the network. That PCI DSS is one that anybody who accepts and stores credit card information must conform to these PCI DSS standards. I don't personally collect or store credit card information. When you purchase from my site, you're actually giving that number directly to a third party that manages the credit card transaction that does comply with PCI DSS. I will tell you, if you come to my site, it's PayPal and it's Stripe. So it's two of the biggest in the industry. I never see the transaction. I purposefully do not. I set it up that way. I don't have access to your credit card information. I don't want access to your credit card information. I don't store your credit card information. And because of that, I'm not having to deal with a lot of the nonsense associated with the PCI DSS standards. So easy to have PCI DSS. And that way I don't have to worry about it. And you don't have to worry that I have that information because I don't have it. I don't have access to it. It's not there. And then finally, last on our list was the DRM, the Digital Rights Management. Digital rights management is a method that combines usually software and or hardware together to be able to manage how software and hardware is used. Digital rights management is very commonly associated with video or audio, but it can really be associated with really anything digital. So running an application, very high-end applications, it's not uncommon to see that you'd have to have a special USB key that would allow that application to work. And if you wanted to run that application on another computer, you got to unplug that USB key and plug it into the other computer. So there's a good way to have that there. So those are the possible answers in this particular case. If you're someone who is creating an application and you want to give the users the ability to effectively the right to be forgotten, that's a common term that you will see on GDPR. The right to be forgotten is an important part, an important consideration for GDPR. That's what that was referring to, and that's why the answer here would be answer B, GDPR. Well, can you believe we went through an hour of Q&A already, and there's even more to come? But don't worry. You can put questions in the chat room. We'll do this as long as you like. We've got all the questions you went through today, by the way, came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have these objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice. Make sure you have these objectives. You can easily get them going to professormesser.com/objectives. Incredibly useful to have. And if you've never used these objectives before, you will be shocked at how much information is in there. They give you everything you need to know. So make sure you're familiar with that and being able to have that there. In fact, if you're wondering, where did this GDPR and PCI DSS and EULA and PHI and DRM come from? Came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. That's where I get it from. That's why the questions I create for you, I know apply to the exam because CompTIA told us that they do. Well, as I mentioned, we do one of these study groups every month. If you want to attend another A+ study group, I have another 2 next month on April the 1st and April the 3rd. And then I've got a Network Plus study group and Security Plus study group next week, if you want to come back next week. And of course, I've got them next month on the 16th and 17th. My schedules are really messed up here, not because I was planning for there to be worldwide chaos, but I thought that there's things going on in my schedule. And I thought doing it this way would make sense. Maybe it just makes more sense now. This would be where you would go to find all of these live events is at professormesser.com/calendar. So if you're watching this even after April the 1st or 3rd, you will always know when the next live event is going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. Well, that ends the part of the study group where I ask you the questions, but it just begins the part of the study group where you ask me questions. So I'll give you ways that you can put questions into the chat room, and I'll give you a phone number that you can call in the after show in just a moment. Don't forget that you get questions like this every weekday by going to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. That's where we put them. Don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, which also helps us by going to professormesser.com/YouTube. Our notes are available there, professormesser.com/1000notes. And don't forget to support the site by visiting us on the Amazon, professormesser.com/Amazon. Stick around. We got plenty more questions. We'll open up the phone lines. We'll do a lot more. But that ends our first hour. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Well, let's see if I can get these phone lines open. Should be able to. This is the part that takes me just a moment because I will be calling in to my own study group. It's all in the cloud these days, including my call-in lines. So I will call into the cloud, and then you will call into the cloud. How does that work? I don't know. It's the cloud. We don't have to know these things. We just have to know that we can do it. So if you bear with me a moment, I will click a button on my side. It's going to make a couple of noises here.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. Let's type in my super secret numbers.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I will do that. And by typing in that PIN number, I'm wondering if I'm welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, sure am. How about that? So now that means that you're able to call in as well. If you're in the continental U.S., you can call in toll free at 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. We've also, anywhere in the non-continental part of the United States and elsewhere in the world, you can also call in for free. Simply use Skype, because Skype requires 0 Skype minutes for a toll-free number. I pick up the tab, put a +1 at the beginning. So +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in there as well. You can also put questions in the chat room. So you're welcome to do that. The chat room, if you're here live, you will find on the same page at professormesser.com/live, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's the YouTube chat is the one that I'm watching. It's the one that I have right here. So those of you wondering, am I actually reading this? Yes, it's right here. I promise you on the screen. I see all your questions come through. It's really there. I really am watching all of those things there. Yes, the way that we have to go through all of the videos and get everything going is all on YouTube. So it just makes sense to do the YouTube chat to have that there as well. Well, we've got some callers that are already coming in. So let's first go to a call, and then we'll pop back to the chat room. Let's go to the 682 area code. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
I'm from Texas.
Thanks for calling. Texas, what can we do for you?
I'm really studying for CompTIA A plus, and my question is, I'm really having trouble with. I do take my time watching Professor Master on his video on YouTube, and most of the time I do right, but I'm having trouble. So my question was, how do I get to study stuff and still remembering when I go to the test?
I think this is the question that we would all like to have the answer to, is how do you retain this information? How do you get it into the brain? How does it stick there? And then how do you get it out there again? And I think it's a combination of certain things. I'm going to go to my website and kind of pop up for you to be able to see what I recommend, and maybe this will help you as well. If you go to the Professor Messer website, there is an option there in either the A+ training. We got a lot of messages on the screen. A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Right, their menus right at the top. There's a link at the bottom of each of those for A+ study recommendations. And those A+ study recommendations will bring up a page that shows 4 different categories. The first one is, I recommend you watch videos. Whether it's my videos or somebody else's, video teaches you in a way that books don't. Videos teach you in a way that hands-on doesn't. So I think videos are a viable and useful way to learn. I think that's something you should put into your training regimen. So videos are good, and of course my course notes may go along with those if that's something that you would like to use. The other resource that I recommend are good books. And there's a number of great A+ books out there. They're all a little bit different. I always recommend that you go to Amazon and you read through a few of them and find one that works for you, because an author's voice may be different than what you were expecting. So those are just some examples that you can go through to be able to have them there. The other choice I put in is plenty of Q&A. Once you've read the books, once you've watched the videos, once you've done some hands-on, it would be nice to get more questions and answers, be able to test yourself to see if you really did retain that information. And if you want to go a little bit of the extra step to really lock it in, I recommend you get plenty of hands-on. There are great ways to really learn how I can get more and more familiar with the commands, familiar with Windows, familiar with the utilities. And one of the best ways to do it is to actually work with it. Be able to touch Windows, use Windows, move around the screen, run the application utilities I mentioned today. If you want to look at a reliability monitor, run reliability monitor. See what it comes up with on your computer. So that's where I recommend you focus. I think those 4 things together it's a common mantra that I always tell people. Those are the 4 things you want to do. I think that might help you as you go through your studies as well.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the call. That's one that I think is you may not use all of them. Some people like to use one of them. Some people use 2 or 3 of them. But I think the more of those you use, the better chance you're going to have for passing that exam. I think it really teaches you differently across the board. There will be some people that say, all you need is a book. just read the book. Some people say, all you need is a video, just watch the video. But I know some people that don't learn well from a book, and I know some people that don't learn well from videos. So there's never a one-size-fits-all with any of this. You really do want to give you something that is going to work with you and teach you in the way that you like to learn things. So find the right combination that works for what you're doing. In the chat room, some folks even mentioning this, that read it in the book, watch it in the video, then go Google some of these things. See how other people are talking about them, and you'll start to sift through some of the information people are talking about. Then you'll start to notice more and more of the words that they're saying, because it is a different language, especially if you go to a lot of the websites where people are talking about fiber optics and the light and the theory that's associated with that. That's obviously much deeper than the exam expects you to go. But now you're starting to pick up some additional content that is associated with those. I think that might help you as well as you're going through all of these and being able to work through it. Let's go back to the phone lines. The 904 area code, my neck of the world. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, it's Junior calling from Jacksonville.
Hello, Jacksonville. Good to have another Floridian on the phone. What can we do for you?
All right, so I'm at SSCJ right now for my associates in computer information technology, and I'm hoping one day to become maybe a network administrator.
Great.
And I'm trying to figure out what languages I should focus on. With my classes, they give me the options of C languages, Java, Visual Basic.net, and I want to say it's Python.
Please say Python. Okay. So I'll give you my perspective of how I see these languages being used, and then we'll also talk about why in the world someone studying for information technology would want to learn any language. And I'll also talk about what I mean when I say a programming language and perhaps a scripting language, because there are significant differences in what we do. And this is not something uncommon in the world of higher education, is when you are getting a degree on something technical like information technology, for some reason, they also want to shoehorn into that some type of programming language. And if you listen to the industry, if you listen to the government, they even have had in the past, they've had these programs where every child should learn to code. And they think that everybody learning IT should learn to code. And my real question to that is, why in the world should everyone learn to code? Not all of us code. In fact, most people in IT don't do any coding. There's no coding at all. It's really a remarkable piece. It's kind of like the people that know nothing about technology are going to tell technologists what they should learn to be able to become smarter with technology. And I understand they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're doing what's best. Oh, you work with computers, you must do a lot of computer programming. No, we don't. In fact, in IT, we do very, very little programming, if no programming at all. Now, when I say that, though, let me at least qualify what I mean by the word programming, because programming is a very broad term that includes so many different types of things. There are effectively, in the world of technology, let's create two camps. Let's have two circles in the Venn diagram that barely, if ever, overlap with each other. One of these circles is IT, information technology. It's the group of people that are managing operating systems, making sure the desktops are working, configuring the VPNs, protecting the data, setting up the networks, setting up the wide area connections, making sure that all of the data on your systems is accessible and that there is redundancy and backups and databases available to store that data, and much more. There's data centers, there's operations, there's plenty more in that list, but it's effectively everybody who is working in a data center or with technology fits into IT. And then you have this other circle that if overlaps with the other one, maybe not at all, if very little, is computer science. We'll just call it computer science, but it's effectively anybody who is creating applications, anybody who is coding, anybody who is building hardware and designing the hardware. So obviously we have to have routers and switches and operating systems. Somebody has to build those routers. Somebody has to build those switches. Somebody has to write the code for these operating systems. That is a completely different group of people that are actually installing the operating system, managing the routers, configuring the switches. Two completely different groups of people. So for me, I've worked in IT for most of my career. There was practically zero programming. Actually, there was no programming involved. I was not designing hardware. I was not building switches. I was not building operating systems. I was not writing applications. Almost nobody in IT does. And that's why you always see a dividing line. There's a group of coders over there that do the coding, and then there's a group of people over here that make sure that the coding is available and runs on the system so that people can use them. That is the line. And there's a reason there's a line there, because both of those circles are incredibly difficult. There's a lifetime of knowledge you would need to be able to do any of those things well. You would need to concentrate on application development for an entire career to become very, very good at application development. You would need to really concentrate, as we've already seen, understanding how Windows operates, managing Active Directory, installing switches and VPNs and redundant configurations, connectivity. There's an entire world and career that you could work through, and in both of those, never learn everything there is to know. So that is the difference in the two places where I put those two buckets in. The thing that is important for you as an IT professional, if somebody wants to manage a network, you want to be able to work with operating systems, you want to create redundant network connections, you want to work on the wide area network, you want to manage dynamic routing configurations, you want to make sure that VPN connections are available to your third-party partners and that all of your data is encrypted over those links. There very often needs to be automation. And automation is something we have always had in IT. It's not a new idea. It seems like the industry is trying to tell us it's new, but it's not. Something we've always done, which is when something happens on the network, when something happens with the server, when something happens at a particular time of the day, we would like a set of functions to occur. And that automation we have always done with shell scripts, PowerShell, and most recently in the industry, Python. Python is probably the one that is the most popular these days because Python is the automation language we have chosen to help automate cloud computing systems. So it is the one we all sort of focus on when we need to automatically build out an application instance and automatically tear down an application instance. We very often focus on Python as being the tool that allows us to do that. We don't use Python to write an app. If you pick up your mobile phone and you're using an app on your mobile phone, we didn't use Python to write that app. An application developer over on the computer science side built the app based on Java or C or any of the many different ways to do it on iOS. You know, those are the people building applications. So when they come to an IT person and say, you need to take a class, do you want to pick C++? Well, I'm not an application developer. Do you want to pick Java? I'm still not an application developer. Do you want to take one of the others you mentioned on that list? But you went through a list of those. Every single one of those was an application development language that if you went into IT, you would probably never touch again in your life. But the one they did mention that I'm sitting here thinking as you're going through the list, please say Python, please say Python, please say Python, because that's the one you want to know. If you're getting into IT, you're going to need to know how to automate. Everybody's automating in Python these days. That's the one that will give you an amazing amount of the ability to tell employers, I'm ready to automate and work with these systems because I know how to do it using Python. They'll go, oh, you know Python? That's great. Okay, we need you to work here and do more Python stuff. Nobody in IT is doing Python 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's not your job in your 8-hour shift is to write Python scripts. But they're going to tell you that you need to manage this cloud-based service. And that cloud-based service is one that during the holiday season or in the last week of the month suddenly becomes more busy We need to make sure those resources are available to all of our users, but this might happen when you're asleep. How can we constantly check on your systems, know if they're being overutilized, and automatically have those systems grow new parts of them so they can handle the load? We're going to do that in Python. So that was an incredibly long answer because it's sort of a pet peeve of mine. But hopefully it's helped other people who are listening in and trying to figure out, where do I start my concentration? What do I really need to study to prepare myself on the IT side? And if you have to take one of those courses, I would recommend Python.
Okay. Yeah, my class is a little bit over everything dealing with IT, so I'm gonna definitely try to focus on that. And I guess I'll call again on the next live stream and see what's the next thing I do after that.
Please do. We'd love to have you call. Best of luck.
All right, thank you.
You know, even though they might teach you at least introductory parts of C++, they might teach you introductory parts of Java, parts of these other programming languages. There are aspects of those programming languages, of every programming language, that you can still use in something like Python, because running a loop in a program is an important concept. Running a while loop, running a do loop, running being able to have different structures in the program and make the program more object-oriented are valuable things to know as well. Even if you never touch C++ again, it would teach you the concept of the standards that we use for understanding variables, for understanding how those variables are used. What is a local variable? What is a global variable? What are these different procedures that I can use? How can I have different functions? How do I reference those functions? Those are things that help you in almost all types of programming languages and scripting languages, so to some degree. So maybe that can help you as well as you're going through those. So that's where I would focus too. There was a question in the chat room early on when we were talking about this and figuring out learning to code or not, as the case may be. Maybe after listening to that, you may realize I didn't want to be in IT. I really wanted to be a coder, which is fine too. But you usually pick one side or the other and you go with it, because it's going to take you a lifetime in whatever you're doing on either side to figure out and become really, really more valuable with all of those things. Let's go. I saw a question come through and it was asking about, is it better to get certified or get a college degree? This last caller was getting a formal degree to be able to work in IT. But of course, this entire first hour of this, we were talking about certifications and industry certification to help people understand what you knew about some of these technologies. And we've got even other things that employers are looking for as well. Some people will say it doesn't matter that you have a college degree. It doesn't matter that you have an industry certification. Really what matters is experience. You'll hear that a lot. The reality is, especially for people who are hiring you, is that it's really a combination of these things. Certain employers will add additional weighting. Some employers really like that you might have a formal degree. Some employers are most interested in you having actual practical experience. Some employers like to see or might even require that you have a particular industry certification. So neither of those replaces the other. It's a combination you would put together to have your resume and your professional the professional showing that you would give to somebody who's hiring to say, I have a little bit of all of this that I can bring to the table. I've got industry certifications that may even be mandated by you as an employer. I have a formal degree that might not only help me now, but in the future, if I ever want to get into IT management, that's something that's going to help you. And I have practical experience that I can bring, and right out of the gate, I might be able to help you. Some employers don't want you to have any experience. Some employers would rather you have maybe no experience because they can pay you less, and their philosophy is they'll teach you as they go. And so it's not an invalid strategy from an employer's perspective. It's just going to be different everywhere you go with all of those. And I usually tell people you want four things. You want a formal education, you want industry certifications, you want practical experience, and it would be great if you knew somebody who was already there. It'd be great if you had a connection, a relationship with someone who already worked in that organization. I realize that becomes a little more difficult now. In the past, I've told you, go to a user group meeting in your area. Go to a Microsoft user group meeting in your area. Go to a Cisco user group meeting in your area and meet those people. It's a little bit too late to do it right now. They're not going to have any Microsoft user group meetings right now. We're not going to have any Cisco user group meetings right now. For those of you watching this in the replay, this may not even be a thing by the time you see this. Everybody will be back to normal. We'll be attending these things again. But the user group meetings are a great place to meet people because these are the people who have jobs in the industry now. And you can ask them directly, I'm interested in getting a job with your company. I could even start in the help desk. I'm really interested in networking. I'm really interested in operating systems. I'm really interested in Linux. What do I need to know when I come in to interview with your organization? What do you look for at the help desk? What you might also find is people want your resume because they can give it to HR, and if you're hired, they get a finder's fee. So you wanting to learn more about this organization and meet the people you're learning this from are just as interested in knowing who you are, because of course, they want people that are knowledgeable coming to work for the company, but it also financially might help them as well. So you may have your resume ready, have your LinkedIn already set up, and your resume on there because they may be asking you for a copy of that to have those. So let's go back to the phones to, you've been holding so long. Thank you, caller. The 919 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hi, caller.
Hi, I'm Robin Williams. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, Robin.
I have a question.
Sure.
On your schedule, I saw that I tried to go into your pop quiz. Are you going to update it? Because it's still in the 22091901902.
So true. And I do need to update the pop quiz questions that are on my site. I've got, in the past, some of you have even seen that I've had some pop quiz questions available. And when the 1000 series came along, I didn't update those questions. And I need to do that because I've got the 900 series questions there, which, as I mentioned, help you to a point. But then there's that 25% of content that's not listed in there. What those have been in the past are the questions that I've had on my study groups that I put into an automated system. And so in fact, this is a great opportunity. I'll get with my marketing manager, Lori, who is watching this, and we will start adding those questions back into the list. It's really been up to me because I want to audit the questions that are there, make sure they still apply to the 220-1001 and 220-1002, get rid of the ones that don't anymore, and then add new ones. And I think we have enough new questions now we can do that. So, Robin, you're absolutely right. And I promise you, I will get on that and list that as a new project, and we'll get some new questions out there for you.
Great, because I missed out in taking the 900 test by 2 weeks when I was in class, so now I have to do the 1,000 ones now.
Well, the good part is that it's only 20 to 25% difference, so there's not much more you would need to learn, but you're absolutely right. They do need to apply. As I've always said, always study from materials that match the version of the exam you're going to take, and it would be good if the materials on my site were actually matching that exam. I absolutely agree, and I will get that done for you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robin. I appreciate it. Thanks for the call. Let's go back to the phones. The 816 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going? My name's Zach. I'm calling from Kansas.
Hey, Zach. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for all the wealth of information you put up online free of charge. I was actually subscribing to another service, and they missed out a bunch of information. Anyway, wasted a lot of time until I found you.
Sorry to hear that.
So my question is pretty relevant to what you were talking about as far as experience. We see this fallacy in a lot of the applications for entry-level jobs where they want you to have experience. I've been doing Active Directory stuff, virtualizing Active Directory environments at home, but it seems a bit beyond kind of what I would be doing at Help Desk. So I'm wondering what kind of things I could be doing at home to put onto my resume for as far as experience.
Well, it certainly helps. The fact that you even have built out an Active Directory database at home in your home lab and you're able to work through those things is also, that's extremely useful. And there's certainly stories that can come from that when you're sitting in a meeting with someone for the very first time, or an interview, or even a phone call. A lot of folks will do phone interviews first before they do that. I think having a good home lab is probably one of the best things anybody can do when they're getting ready to look for a job in this industry. Not necessarily because the employer will be impressed that you're running Microsoft Windows Server at home, because they're running hundreds of instances of Microsoft Server in their data center. At least there's a bit of a connection. But I think what a home lab gives you is a good place to break things and a good place to not install things properly the first time. Whenever that happens, I always tell people, please make a note of what just happened. Not even a mental note, but you may want to write down the situation that you just had. There was a problem that you created when you installed it. The DNS setting wasn't set properly, and when you tried to connect a workstation, it would not connect properly to the server. Here's how I did the troubleshooting to figure that out. Here are the websites I found that told me what I was doing wrong. I made these modifications, and now suddenly I have access from this workstation so that I can join the domain and be able to be managed from the Active Directory server. That story is what employers are listening for in an interview. They want to know about a problem that you've had. They want to know about the process you went through to solve that problem, and they want to know what the final resolution of that was. They want to see that you have the concept and the scope of going through the troubleshooting process, because you're going to be using that troubleshooting process the rest of your career. With anything that you do, that troubleshooting process becomes incredibly important. And so some of you I know are listening, well, I don't have Windows Server at home. I don't have Microsoft Windows at home to connect to this. How do I spin up all of these systems to be able to use this? And I think one of the best ways to do it is to set up a set of virtual machines on your desktop and be able to do that. If not, have a separate virtual machine server. Now we're sort of getting into the geeky side of it. Let's build a server. Well, it'll be our VM machine, and it'll run VMware's products. Or if you're like me, you just run it on the desktop that you already have. A lot of people will use VirtualBox. A lot of people will use VMware Player. And there are other third-party virtualization systems that you can run on top of your existing operating system. And a lot of people don't realize that Microsoft has evaluation versions of Windows Server that will run for, I think it's 90 days. They also have virtualization or virtualized Microsoft Windows clients, Windows 10, that will run on your workstation as well. You can download it as a VM, and it's free. It will also run for 90 days. The website to get that is modern.ie, modern.ie. It is the Microsoft Edge developer website where all of the Microsoft Edge developers go to test their apps. Under the reference pull-down menu is an option for tools, and those tools include virtual machines for legacy testing. And that includes virtual machines running Windows 10, and it has virtualization platforms for VirtualBox, Vagrant, Hyper-V, which is in Windows, VMware, which is in Windows and Mac, and Parallels, which is Mac. VirtualBox also is Mac. I don't know why they put that there. It's Mac and Linux. And you can download a Windows 10 VM right there so that you've got Windows Server running. You got Windows Client running. You can do the same thing if you're a Linux person. Load up a Linux environment. Load up a CentOS. Load up a client that's running running Mint or Ubuntu, and run Linux in your local environment. How about loading up your own firewall and running pfSense on your local network? You can do that in a VM and have those things there. All of those become incredibly important to be able to have those stories. So when you walk in the door, even though you haven't been hired by a company before, there's no practical experience that you could put on your resume. You have a lot of interesting experience that you've had on your local network. So that's where I would recommend that you concentrate as well. Having that home lab becomes incredibly important. And if you've done some things with Microsoft already, which it sounds like you have, Zach, I would also focus on making sure that you're familiar with the Linux side as well, because every company that has Windows servers also has Linux servers as well. Not just a percentage of them, 100% of them have both of those operating systems running in their environment today, and you never know what they might be looking for when you walk in the door.
Thank you. Yeah, so but with my documenting, I should just kind of focus more on the troubleshooting side of things and leverage that more than, oh yeah, I've accomplished putting this environment together, focus more on the difficulties I had on that part.
Yeah, I can give you an example of that. The one with setting up your Microsoft server for the first time with Active Directory, one of the most common problems is that the DNS setting is wrong and that the client that you would try to connect to the Active Directory can't find the Active Directory because the DNS setting is incorrect. That's just sort of like a 101 problem, but it's so common that people almost expect you to have that particular issue. Another good story you could have is you load up maybe pfSense that is also running Snort. There's a number of, Snort is an intrusion prevention and intrusion detection software. There's some VMs that you can find out on the net that have already combined those two together. They're running on the same VM. And if you can start running your network traffic through it, you will be shocked at what you see going in and out of your network, and you'll be much more aware of all of the attacks that may be coming in from the internet. And it'll be very interesting, all of the different sites your computers are talking to across the internet. You'll be able to document and see all of those in the firewall. Everything is logged. And you'll also see how much of those traffic flows going through your network are firing on alarms and alerts in the intrusion prevention system. So that is already a great story. Oh, I plugged this into the internet. You will never believe what I found coming into my network. Here's the list of these things. Those are great stories to have when you go to an interview. An interview is about stories. It's not about, I know they always start with, tell us a little about yourself. And of course, that is an important part. They want to know if you're somebody who's compatible with their organization and that you would work well with others. But they might also ask you about, tell us about you having to solve a problem. Oh, well, I've had plenty of those. Let me tell you about one I had with installing Active Directory. Let me tell you about the things I found coming into my network. Because every employer has a firewall. They all have intrusion prevention. They all have Active Directory. They all have Linux. These are things that you can run in your home lab that are exactly the same systems that are running in a production enterprise environment. Why not have a story available about all of those things? And you could probably think of 5 or 6 others that would be interesting to set up about applications, set up Apache web server, set up databases, set up Microsoft SQL Server, or set up MySQL, and get some databases running. Set up WordPress locally on your network that connects to that database that is managed from an Active Directory server. So you're sort of combining a lot of these together and seeing what can happen. It's remarkable what you would find, and it's some great stories you would have when you go into the interview.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate the call. That home lab becomes really important. It's something that will help differentiate you when you walk in the door. We all like to hear good stories, and we all, especially technical people, love technical stories. So this is a very good example of how you can create your own stories so that you have something to talk about during an interview. The last thing you want is the interview to go short. We've allocated an hour. Well, we're done in 30 minutes. That's the worst thing that could happen to you. You would like it to go long. You would love to be able to talk an hour and 30 minutes. So how do you do that? Well, let's talk about some of the stuff I have in my lab, some of the things I've done, some of the things I've set up, some of the things I'm trying to do. And then you can ask them, hey, I'd like to expand my lab by adding in some Cisco equipment. What would you recommend? What do you think? Should I get a switch, a router? What types? How would I hook those up? You're going to have a whole conversation there. You are never expected to know everything in the world when you walk into an interview. It's almost better if you say, I'd love to get some help on this other thing. I'd love to know more about this particular topic. That's where I'm going to go next. I'm going to learn routing and switching. I'm going to learn Linux. I'm going to learn more Python. They want to see those things, and having those there becomes really, really useful. Let's go back to the phone. 703 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? 703. Are you there, Virginia? Not the person. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? One of the things I often find, in fact, when I'm going into the interview process, somebody in the chat room mentioned this, that your interview, you say it lasted 1.5 hours, but you felt like it went horribly. One of the things you want to be able to do in an interview is to have a conversation and not have them always asking the question. Whenever I go into an interview, there's usually, 10 or 12 questions that I know I'm going to ask somebody when they come in. Tell us about yourself. If you were a tree, what type of tree would you be? Okay, I probably wouldn't ask that one, but there are questions. Tell us about a problem you had and how you solved it. Those are just awful questions. It would be much better if you drove the interview. Sometimes you can do that. Some people that are in an interview mode where they really want to hear from you will not drive the interview and just have this static set of questions. Well, you've answered the 5 questions. Thank you for coming and good day. The best interviews I've ever had is we kind of started off with one topic and then we just had a conversation. Tell us about this. What'd you do with that? Tell us about this thing. Oh, did you plug that in? I've never run that. What did you think of that? Those are the best kinds that you can work with. I think that's one that I would work with too. Let's go to 954, South Florida. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hello, Professor Messer. This is Kevin from Pembroke Pines.
Hey, Kevin, out there in Pembroke Pines. Good to hear from you. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I'm calling you to tell you that I just got promoted at my Comcast job to Comcast Business.
Nice.
I came from residential, and now I'm in Comcast Business in the technical department.
Well, now I am one of your customers, Kevin, so I have to call in now with a technical problem.
Yeah, and now it's more dealing with IT and stuff like that, and I definitely want to definitely thank you for all the knowledge that you gave me. Because if it wasn't for your examinations or whatever, I would never pass my CompTIA.
Well, I did the easy part, Kevin. You're the one that actually had to apply it and pass the exam. And what a good example, by the way. And I say this all the time in these study groups, that this is an industry that we work in where there's just no ceiling. We can just keep doing this. We can keep learning more. We can keep moving up. We can keep learning more. We can keep moving up. It's a great opportunity for anybody who wants to really get into an industry and do this type of thing. And I love to hear these stories about somebody they've really been working hard on it. They've been getting their certifications. They've been going through these challenges and figuring it out. And whenever that happens, it's not luck, Kevin. It's hard work and seeing the opportunities and taking advantages of them. Congratulations.
Yeah, and the irony is that when the recruiter from Comcast contacted me on careerbuilder.com, they was more interested in my A+ than my Network Plus. It's like for some certain reason, I get more attention for my A+ than my Network Plus.
Maybe the case is, and I've seen this. I have worked with Comcast Business for a very long period of time. I'm very happy with Comcast Business, and I've had situations where I have had my router go out on a Sunday morning, and by Sunday noon, someone was here replacing the router. And this is the thing that we rely on whenever, especially me. That's if I'm disconnected from the internet, I'm really out of business. And those people are very, very familiar with the network. They understand the networking side of things and plugging all of those things in. Not everybody understands the operating system side. And occasionally I'll have conversations with them. I just kind of ran through a challenge that I had here with multiple VLANs. I was having a static routing problem internally. There was issues with a particular manufacturers of modem for Comcast Business that will not do static routing if the route is not directly connected. A lot of weird things like that. And they were spot on. They knew exactly what to do. But when it came to setting up those static routes in the operating system, maybe not so much. So maybe they were looking for somebody who had a little bit more knowledge with Windows and Linux. You never know.
Yeah. And speak about routers, I should like put out a PSA to people. I think a lot of people don't understand about Comcast routers is that Comcast, like right now, the whole coronavirus thing, Comcast is giving out free Wi-Fi, and I don't think people understand that they router that they rent actually put out two signals: they private network and also a public network for their customers, which is a way for Comcast to get more money at the customer expense, because at the end of the day, I mean, the router only has so much processing power, and when it's doing public Wi-Fi, that you got to watch out for stuff like that. That's why people sometimes wonder why the Wi-Fi start lagging, is maybe because you have somebody using your Wi-Fi, not your Wi-Fi network, but using.
And in fact, this is something that it's a double-edged sword, because this is something Comcast started doing a couple of years ago, is that if you have a Comcast router, it's not only advertising your local wireless SSID, there's also an Xfinity Wi-Fi SSID that's being advertised out of that router. So that the idea was that if you have a Comcast router, they can build kind of this mesh of networks wherever you happen to go, that you would at least have access to a network. And this actually helps me, because if I go to a local restaurant that is in a bad area for AT&T cellular network, on site they have Comcast, and I'm able to connect to their local Comcast network because I'm a Comcast customer. Now, of course, they've opened it up for the time being so that's free. Anybody can connect to it. But that was one of the advantages to that. The disadvantages is the one you're mentioning. There's challenges with frequency use. There's challenges with availability of the wireless network that's around you. It's not always seamless. And of course, Comcast gives you a way to turn that off. You can go to the administration on the website and say, I don't want to do that anymore, and it turns off that SSID. So you do have an option whether you would like to use it or not. But it's something that sometimes it can come in handy, sometimes not so much. And it's useful to be able to talk to somebody who knows about the details of wireless networks. Maybe that's what the A+ was for.
Yeah, I explain that to the customers a lot of times. That's why I try to encourage customers to get their third-party equipment. I tell them, first of all, you can avoid the fee, but second of all, you don't have to worry about your router being overloaded, because people don't know that the router is used as a hotspot. When I break that down to them, they just shocked and surprised, like, how come no one ever tell me? I said, well, actually, it's on Comcast website. If you actually go to their website, they mention it.
Yep.
So they do advertise, but it's kind of like one of those unknown secrets that only a few people know about.
Well, now more people know about it, Kevin, thanks to you. And congratulations on the new job. I can't wait to hear what happens next with you.
Okay, so thank you for your hard work. Like I said, you definitely a yeoman to the IT industry.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Congratulations.
All right. Bye.
That's whenever I start thinking about these things, some people in the chat room were mentioning this, is that, well, don't use the Comcast routers. Well, for home, you can swap out the router or put it into a pass-through mode. They call it bridge mode in some of these scenarios, so that you can have your own wireless access point /router/Soho device, which is what I do at home. I have a wireless router. I got a Synology router. And so I just pass through. The Comcast is effectively just a cable modem at that point. And I've turned off all the Comcast functionality. There's no wireless routers on there. There's no NATing on that device. It just passes through the signal. And then my Synology router is the one with the wireless access point, and I manage that device. With Comcast Business, which is a different part of Comcast, they provide you with the router. You don't have a choice what router is used. This is very common in business type environments, is that the provider gets to dictate what type of equipment will be used. Well, Comcast Business has a very strict set of service level agreements with their customers. I mentioned earlier, I had a router go out on a Sunday morning. Somebody was there within 4 hours to replace that router. That is one of the agreements I have with Comcast, because I have a Comcast Business contract and not a Comcast residential contract. So it costs a little bit more for me to have that equipment, but Comcast dictates, well, if we're going to do that, you have to use our equipment to be able to do what you need to do. Now, I have some choices in what equipment I can use. Comcast is very good. Well, do you want to use this equipment, that equipment, or the other? That's fine. But one of the challenges you have is it's very, very complex sometimes in managing this. But in my case, I got to use Comcast router. It's just the way the contract worked out to be able to have that there. Whenever I start working through each different wireless or internet provider, they all have different rules and different things that they would do. So that's one where hopefully that would give you the idea of where that would come from. Whenever I start looking at my home network, I prefer having my own equipment. Some people don't. Some people prefer having Comcast handle it. If the device fails, then they'll have Comcast replace that device. You could replace Comcast router, the modem as well, if you really, really wanted to. I have not. I've kept Comcast's modem, and then I bought a router to go with it. I guess I could swap that out as well, but it's that scenario that if their modem goes bad, it's hard for me to find a new modem. I can't necessarily go down to the Best Buy and pick one out and get it. I would probably have to get it from Amazon during some other non-pandemic situation and have it shipped to me. But for Comcast router, Soho router, like I'm using, I can really kind of get one of those, probably have one in the closet that could get me through until I get a replacement for the current version. So that's one of those that becomes useful. Do I have any wireless router recommendations? Well, I'll tell you the one that I liked, I really like, was the one from Synology. Synology is a company that has network access storage NAS devices. I use Synology NAS to store all of the data on my website. When I'm working with video, I shoot the video here as we're sitting here. It's the same set. So I shoot the video that I'm doing, but it's stored on some equipment that's down here. It's these video recorders that are down here to my bottom right. These are two 19-inch racks to the left and right of me. They're soundproofed. And so I've got video recorders that are there. They're recording the camera that you see in front of you and right here, this one. Hi, camera. It's recording what's coming from that camera, and it's recording what's on my screen. So when I show you a screenshot, here's a screen of the Synology website, it's also recording that. So I have all of this video that's done when I finished shooting, where I've shot a course for you. It stores that video down here. I have to now store that somewhere else because the size of these SSDs is about 2 or 4 different. 4 terabytes is probably the biggest size I have there. And so I've got to take that once I finish editing and then move that data off to be stored for archive later. I may need to go back to that video for something. And so I need to store it somewhere, and Synology is where I store it. They have network storage that does that. And I have a Synology NAS that makes that happen. Let me stick my head up there so you can see what I'm doing. They have other products as well. Synology is well known for their disk station, the Synology NAS that they have. But they have other products too, both software and hardware. The one that I'm using for my home router, not my office router, because that's obviously Comcast, is the one from Synology. Let's see if I can find this. I've got most everything here. Oh, there, networking. So the one that I'm running at home, I think, is their higher-end Wi-Fi system. It's not this one. That's their mesh router. Where's the other one? Networking. Maybe it's the 2600 AC. This is the one I'm running at home. So there's the one I have in my home, not in my studio, and it's big. It's got plenty. It's the AC standard. Is it a 2x? Let's see what it is. Here's the specs. There. Why don't we just click the specs? Are you like me? You just click the spec screen. I don't need to see the details of this. So I could see it for 5 gigahertz. Each one of these gives me about 2 gigabit. So it's a 2x2. 2x2 with 160 megahertz, 2x2 with 8080 on a discontiguous wave. I think in my network, I'm probably running 2x2 160. So it's not super fast, but heck, it's pretty good. For internet, in my house, the internet connectivity is 100 megabit. So it's not a gig. Or did I do 500 at home? Maybe I did a gig at home now that I'm mentioning it because Comcast has it. But you can see the Wi-Fi support certainly more than that. So that's plenty to what I am running. And having that there, it's a very nice router. The front end on the router is the one that's most impressive to me. Let's see if they got pictures of the UI. The user interface is fantastic. There it is. It is remarkable. Easy to use. The routing is so nice because underneath the surface, it's running Linux. So now all of Synology's products run Linux under the surface. And so it allows me to really do everything I want to do with NATing, port forwarding. I do a lot of static routing here because I have a home network and a business network, and I don't want them talking to each other, but I do need to route some traffic through. It's got a lot of functionality with Wi-Fi, including the ability. Let's see if they have the page to set it up. I can set up one Wi-Fi link. This has internet filtering. This is not it at all. They have one Wi-Fi link that you could set up to be primary, and then I can plug in a different Ethernet link to be secondary. So if I wanted to take my home Comcast and have it be primary and take my business Comcast and plug it into another interface, I can tell the router, don't use this secondary interface unless the first one goes down. So I've got redundancy there. Now you would think why don't I just set that up? That makes perfect sense. Why aren't you setting up your network to be redundant? Well, it's because they're both really coming out of my house on the same cable. I mean, they're all really, it's down the street is a box. At the end of my driveway is a box. They're running two cables to my house, one for the business, one for the home. So if there's an outage, the outage isn't here. The outage is somewhere past my house. So if the home network goes out, the business network's going to go out too. So having them redundant doesn't help very much. 100% of the time, that's the way that it has worked. The only time where there's been an advantage to having two separate setups like that is when that router went out with a Comcast business and I lost that router. The router failed locally. I was able to reroute my traffic over to my home and use my home internet in the meantime. So there is some redundancy there. I can still do a live stream even if I lose one of those networks. But if it's anything on the Comcast side, it won't help having redundancy. They're both going to go out at the same time and same issues. It's just one of those things you have to work through. You have to deal with that when you work through all of these things. When you think about how do I keep a business up and running? How do I make a live stream available to you? How do I make sure that I've always got connectivity to the internet? Those are the things. That's why I don't keep servers here. If you're connecting to ProfessorMesser.com, you're connecting to a cloud service. I think all of my servers are in Texas. You're connecting to Texas, and that's where the web servers are. That's where the load balancers are. That's where the databases are. Interesting enough, your first connection probably isn't in Texas. You're connecting to a reverse proxy, and the reverse proxies are located around the world, multiple reverse proxies in the US and elsewhere. So you're connecting to a local proxy, and that local proxy is then connecting to Texas. See how complicated this can be? You can really set up some interesting things that way. But the idea is so that you have the fastest access, the most redundant access. If we lose connectivity, there's always another server there. There's always another network connection there. There's always more available there. It becomes pretty important to have that too. Well, that brings us to the end of our second hour. We did all the questions in the beginning in this first hour from the Core 2. We did more questions from your phone calls and your questions in the chat room. I want to bring up my calendar for next week so you can see what we're doing on there. If you go to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar, you'll be able to see all the calendar events that we have. Today, of course, was the 1002. On the 24th of March, next week, we have our Network Plus study group. And on the 26th of March, again, a Tuesday and Thursday of next week, is the Security Plus study group. You're welcome to come back and see us then as well. We'll do plenty more Q&A. We do one of these every month. We'd love to have you back for those as well. Thank you for being here this time. Thank you for your support of the site. We love doing these live streams. We love talking to you. We're so glad you're able to join us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group.